Hi, automotive enthusiasts. Welcome to Boost Bureau, where we explore machines, culture, and the stories that move us. Today, we turn our spotlight onto the Volvo 262C Bertone Coupe, a car that seemed to defy expectations at every turn. Built between 1978 and 1981, it carried the DNA of Sweden, Italy, and even France in a single angular package. Dismissed by many when it was new, this rare Volvo has since grown into a symbol of curiosity and reappraisal in the collector world. In this video, we'll dive into the full narrative arc of the 262C, its strange birth in collaboration with Italian coach builder Bertone, its awkward reception and survival in the American marketplace, and its surprising afterlife as a misunderstood, but increasingly fascinating collectible. What makes the 262C so compelling isn't just the way it looked, though the chopped roof and vinyl top are unforgettable. It's the collision of cultural values embedded in it. Sweden's reputation for safety and pragmatism ran headfirst into Italy's flair for style, and beneath it all lurked a V6 engine co-developed with Renault and Peugeot that confused loyal Volvo fans even more. We'll unpack how that clash of priorities made the car both alluring and alien, an object of status but also skepticism. Over the course of this journey, you'll see why the 262C stands as more than a footnote. It's a case study in what happens when automakers take risks on unfamiliar territory and how those risks can age in unexpected ways. Together, we'll retrace the design choices that set it apart, the economic and cultural context that shaped its reception, and the winding road that has brought it back into conversation today. Think of this story as a prism. Tilt it one way, and you see the missteps that doomed it to obscurity. Tilt it another, and you spot the uniqueness that now makes it desirable. By the time we finish, you may find yourself looking at the 262C not as an oddball failure, but as a daring move that predicted how global collaboration could reshape even the most buttoned-down brands. So buckle in as we peel back the layers of Volvo's unlikely coupe, from the boardrooms of Gothenburg to the showrooms of America, and beyond into the garages of collectors who never forgot its peculiar charm. The late 1970s was a period of turbulence in the automotive world. Fuel crises, tightening emission standards, and changing tastes pushed automakers to experiment in directions they might not have considered during the freewheeling years before. For Volvo, a company rooted in boxy practicality and stoic engineering, the question was how to extend its reach into the premium market without losing its identity. The answer, at least for a brief time, came in the form of the 262C Bertone Coupe. Microstory. In Gothenburg, the project began with a desire to craft a prestige model that could stand against European luxury coupes. Executives realized their lineup lacked a true halo vehicle, something that could sit alongside Mercedes and Jaguar in the eyes of American buyers. But rather than reinventing the wheel internally, they reached out to Bertone in Italy, hoping that the same studio that penned sleek Alfa Romeos and Fiats could transform Volvo's staid image. The result was a chopped roof coupe. Based on the 200 series platform, its stance instantly different from anything Volvo had ever shown. That styling choice, bold as it was, also became its defining controversy, as purists wondered why a practical, Swedish sedan suddenly looked like a disco-era fashion accessory. Microstory. At Bertone's Turin facility, craftsmen hand-finished each body, giving the 262C a bespoke aura rare in its price bracket. But production in Italy added costs and complexity, and the quality control sometimes clashed with Volvo's reputation for durability. Still, the process underscored Volvo's willingness to take risks in pursuit of cachet. Owners who bought the car knew often recall that it felt simultaneously exotic and slightly out of step, as though it didn't entirely belong on American roads dominated by domestic V8 coupes. That tension is exactly what makes its story fascinating. Context digest. The PRV V6 engine under the hood was another twist. Co-developed by Peugeot, Renault, and Volvo, it was meant to provide smooth performance and shared development costs, but its reputation for lackluster reliability haunted the car. In an era when Volvo's four-cylinder engines were nearly indestructible, the 262C's heart seemed less certain. American buyers who prized Volvo for its toughness were puzzled. while others saw the V6 as a step toward European refinement. This tension over mechanical identity mirrors the styling dilemma. Was the car truly a Volvo or a cultural hybrid that never found equilibrium? Micro story. The vinyl roof became a talking point. To some, it was stylish and fit the times. An upscale flourish borrowed from American luxury coupes. To others, it felt like a betrayal of Scandinavian honesty, an unnecessary decoration that clashed with the brand's minimalism. In showrooms, that roof made the 262C stand out, but it also turned away conservative buyers who equated Volvo with straightforward utility. One can imagine the sales staff in US dealerships trying to explain why the most expensive Volvo carried a feature usually mocked as frivolous. Reflection bridge. What emerges in these early years is the sense of a car caught between two worlds, embodying a gamble on image that some loved and others rejected outright. Microstory. Pricing played a decisive role. At around $15,000 in 1978, the 262C was far from cheap. Positioned against established luxury brands, it had to justify itself not through tradition, but through uniqueness. In some ways, that gave it an aura of exclusivity, with limited production numbers reinforcing its rarity. Yet many buyers hesitated, wondering why they should spend Mercedes money on a Volvo with odd styling and an unproven engine. The contradiction kept sales modest, ensuring that only a select few reached American driveways. Context digest. The US market was central to the 262C's destiny. Volvo knew its American audience was larger than its European one when it came to aspirational cars. Yet the tastes of US buyers in the late 70s leaned toward power and prestige rather than eccentricity. As a result, the car found a niche rather than mainstream success, often attracting those who appreciated being seen in something different rather than universally admired. This niche identity would later shape its collector value. Micro story. An interesting side note involves Volvo's decision to offer only an automatic transmission in the US. While consistent with the luxury positioning, it alienated some enthusiasts who might have embraced the coupe's exclusivity but wanted more control behind the wheel. The automatic reflected Volvo's reading of the American market, but narrowed the car's appeal even further. Looking back, that choice seems symbolic of the compromises that define the 262C. Elegant intentions constrained by assumptions. Reflection bridge. With all these conflicting choices, the early narrative of the 262C becomes one of ambition meeting friction, a reminder that breaking from tradition is rarely smooth. Context digest. Despite its struggles, the 62C did plant seeds of ambition. Volvo proved it was willing to collaborate internationally, invest in design flair, and chase a global luxury identity. While the execution faltered, the precedent would influence future Volvos that balanced safety with style. The coupe's mixed reception became a learning experience, shaping strategies for decades to come. Micro story. Owners who embraced the car often leaned into its uniqueness. Anecdotes tell of people fielding constant questions at gas stations, their Volvo mistaken for an American custom or even an Italian import. That curiosity created a small but dedicated fan base, people who relished being part of an inside story. For them, the car's contradictions weren't flaws but features, proof that they valued individuality over convention. Micro story. In the broader automotive world, the late 70s were filled with experiments. Chrysler was struggling with downsizing, Cadillac was reinventing itself, and Japanese brands were finding footholds in new segments. Against that backdrop, the 262C wasn't the only car that seemed slightly out of place, but it was perhaps the most emblematic of a brand stepping outside its comfort zone. This makes it not just a Volvo story, but a snapshot of how the entire industry wrestled with change. Micro story. Production remained limited, around 6,600 units over its short run, and that scarcity both helped and hurt. On one hand, it prevented the coupe from ever building broad recognition. On the other, it ensured that decades later, collectors could point to it as a rare survivor. Rarity, when paired with oddity, often breeds intrigue. The 262C carried both, As the disco era ended and the 1980s unfolded, the world into which the 262C had been launched began to shift, and so did the meaning of the car itself. To trace that evolution, we need to follow it into its middle years. As the 1980s dawned, the Volvo 262C found itself in a market that was rapidly transforming. Consumer expectations shifted toward sharper lines, turbocharged performance, and cleaner design cues, leaving the disco-inflected details of the coupe looking like artifacts of another age. What was daring in 1978 began to feel dated by 1981, and that passage of time reshaped the car's role from bold statement to curious outlier. Micro-story. In American suburbs, owners of the 262C often discovered that their investment didn't hold prestige as intended. While neighbors admired its rarity, they also questioned its quirks. Conversations at country clubs or office parking lots revealed a subtle hierarchy, where a Mercedes SEC or BMW 6 Series carried instant recognition, while the Volvo prompted puzzled glances. Owning one meant constantly explaining why you chose it, a ritual that could either bolster pride or wear thin. Context digest. Volvo itself was evolving. By 1981, the company leaned harder on its bread-and-butter sedans and wagons, especially turbocharged versions that recaptured attention through performance rather than image. In that context, the 262C seemed less relevant, almost like a side project from a different era. Its discontinuation felt inevitable, yet the decision cemented its status as a brief but telling experiment. Micro-story. For the enthusiasts who refused to let it fade, the car became a canvas. Some swapped engines, replacing the PRV, V6 with Volvo's durable turbofors or even American V8s. Others leaned into the car's Italian styling, restoring interiors with care that elevated them beyond their original finish. These modifications transformed the coupe from a misfit into a conversation piece at shows and meets, where its rarity guaranteed attention. Reflection bridge. That act of reinvention underscored a truth. Cars that falter in the mainstream sometimes thrive in subcultures that appreciate their eccentricities. Micro-story. The 262C's interior deserves a closer look. Volvo offered supple leather, plush carpeting, and wood trim, details meant to signal luxury, but the ergonomics and build quality sometimes revealed the tension between Swedish function and Italian flourish. Seats were supportive, but switches and fittings lacked the tank-like consistency of standard Volvos. Owners thus lived with a paradox, enjoying comfort but questioning durability, a mix that made ownership a unique adventure. Context digest. In collector psychology, timing often determines value. During the 1990s and early 2000s, the Volvo 262C languished, with prices so low that some examples were scrapped rather than saved. Enthusiasts saw them as oddities rather than treasures, and only the most dedicated sought to preserve them. This fall from grace illustrates how quickly prestige can evaporate once the cultural moment moves on. Micro-story. Yet within Volvo's own corporate memory, the 262C did not vanish. Executives looked back at the Bertone experiment as proof that the brand could dare to be stylish. The lessons filtered into later cars, from the 780 Coupe to the clean elegance of modern S90s. In a way, the 262C was a rough draft of a more balanced Volvo identity, one that could aspire to luxury without abandoning Scandinavian restraint. Reflection bridge. Every brand has these transitional models, vehicles that stumble so the next generation can stride more confidently. Micro-story. For American owners who kept their 262Cs through the decades, the car became a badge of resilience. They faced the challenge of sourcing rare trim pieces, dealing with fading vinyl roofs, and coaxing reliability from the PRV engine. The effort built a sense of pride, the feeling that preserving the coupe meant keeping alive, a story others had forgotten. At shows, their cars were often surrounded by curious onlookers who had never seen one before, a reminder of how invisibility can become a lure. Context digest. By the mid-2000s, a cultural shift towards celebrating Radwood-era cars changed the 262C's fortunes. Suddenly, What looked awkward was now vintage cool. The vinyl roof and square lines fit perfectly into an aesthetic that prized authenticity over perfection. Younger enthusiasts, who grew up surrounded by uniform crossovers, began to see the Coupe as a refreshing oddball, a bridge to a time when automakers dared to take risks. Microstory. Auction records reveal this change vividly. Cars that once sold for scrap value began commanding serious attention, with pristine examples climbing in price. The very rarity that once hurt the 262C's visibility now protected its desirability, ensuring that survivors became cherished. This reversal illustrates how cultural context can rewrite the narrative of a car long after production ends. Microstory. Social media added another twist. Instagram and YouTube amplified the Coupe's visual impact, its low roofline and unusual stance translating into digital shareability. Suddenly, a car mocked in the showroom era became a star online, featured in content that celebrated design, quirks rather than conformity. Through this lens, the 262C earned a second life, appreciated by a global audience far larger than the one it had during its official run. In this revived stage of its existence, the 262C was no longer merely a misunderstood Volvo. It had become a symbol of how time can transform perception and how once-forgotten machines can achieve immortality, not through mass appeal but through dedicated cult status. To fully understand how this transformation completes its arc, we must follow the 262C into its current chapter as a collectible and cultural icon. Today, the Volvo 262C Bertone Coupe stands as a collectible that thrives on its contradictions. What was once derided as awkward now reads as bold, and what once seemed overpriced now feels like a bargain compared to mainstream classics. Its very flaws have become part of its mystique, inviting enthusiasts to reconsider what makes a car worth preserving. Microstory. In modern collector circles, the 262C is often presented as a talking piece at Radwood events or concours gatherings. Its chopped roof and vinyl top make it instantly recognizable among a sea of ordinary sedans. Owners relish the moment when strangers approach with puzzled expressions, asking if it's a custom build. That misunderstanding is part of its magic, proof that the car resists easy categorization. Context digest. From a market perspective, the 262C occupies a fascinating middle ground. It is rare with just over 6,600 produced, but not so rare that it's unattainable. Prices have risen, yet remain accessible compared to high-demand European coupes. This balance has made it a darling for enthusiasts who want exclusivity without entering the stratosphere of Ferrari or Porsche ownership. The practical underpinnings of the 200 series also make it easier to maintain than some might expect, though trim pieces can still be a challenge. Microstory. The story of preservation often hinges on individuals who saw value before the broader market did. In the early 2000s, small communities of Volvo loyalists kept the 262C alive, sharing parts, advice, and encouragement through forums and newsletters. Their dedication ensured that when the broader collector world turned its attention to the model, there were survivors ready to shine. Without these unsung caretakers, the car's revival might never have happened. Reflection bridge. This highlights how automotive history isn't written only by corporations or designers, but also by passionate owners who refuse to let a story fade. Microstory. A cultural shift toward valuing authenticity has elevated the coupe's place in the spotlight. While other cars of the disco era are remembered for excess, the 262C embodies a different kind of experiment, one that sought to merge restraint with flair. In the eyes of contemporary enthusiasts, that balancing act feels more relevant than ever, as brands today continue to navigate global collaboration and shifting identities. The coupe thus reads like a prologue to our modern era of cross-pollinated design. Context digest. The collector landscape is also influenced by generational change. Younger enthusiasts who never experienced the 262C in showrooms are discovering it fresh without the baggage of 1970s criticism. To them, the car is not a misstep, but a discovery, something outside the predictable icons. This generational reinterpretation is breathing new life into values and interest, ensuring the car's place in upcoming auctions and private collections. Microstory. Restorations have taken on an artisanal quality. Specialists who understand both Volvo engineering and Bertone craftsmanship are few, but their work elevates the car into something beyond novelty. A freshly restored 262C feels almost like a bespoke piece of design history, reminding us that these cars were hand-finished in Turin before finding their way to American driveways. Each restored example becomes both artifact and conversation starter. Reflection bridge. That act of restoration is more than mechanical. It's cultural preservation, turning what could have been forgotten into a living testament to collaboration and risk-taking. Microstory. On American roads today, spotting a 262C is a rare thrill. Enthusiasts often recount chance encounters at gas stations or highway rest stops, where the sight of the low-roof coupe sparks memories or curiosity. Those moments crystallize why cars like this matter, not because they were perfect, but because they were distinct. In a landscape of conformity, they remind us of the times when automakers dared to stretch beyond their comfort zones. Context. Digest. Looking at the broader market, we see parallels with other misunderstood vehicles that have aged into cult classics. The BMW 8 Series of the 1990s, the Cadillac Alante, even certain Japanese coupes once dismissed as odd, now carry a devoted following. The 262C fits into this lineage of rediscovery, proving that initial reception does not determine final legacy. Microstory. Perhaps the greatest irony is that the 262C, once seen as not Volvo enough, now helps define Volvo's willingness to experiment. Modern enthusiasts point to it as a precursor to cars like the stylish C70 Coupe and convertible, which carried the torch of design-forward Volvos decades later. In this sense, the 262C did not fail. It planted seeds that eventually bore fruit in more accepted forms. Microstory. The personal experiences of owners continue to shape its narrative. Stories of long drives, patient restorations, and unexpected friendships formed around the coupe are woven into its identity. These lived experiences give it warmth that statistics cannot convey, and they ensure that its story is passed down not just through books or videos, but through communities of people who keep it alive. In the present day, the Volvo 262C Bertone Coupe stands not only as a relic of a bold experiment, but as a symbol of how time redeems the misunderstood. Its odd proportions and daring collaboration no longer mark it as a misfit, but as a touchstone. For enthusiasts who value individuality and risk-taking, its journey from showroom curiosity to cultural artifact is complete, and it proves that every chapter in automotive history, no matter how unlikely, has the power to inspire when given, the chance to be rediscovered. So as we bring this story to a close, let's step back and see what the Volvo 262C Bertone Coupe really represents. It was never about raw numbers, never about dominating sales charts, and never about being universally adored. Instead, it was about a company daring to experiment with identity, about a collaboration that bridged Sweden, Italy, and France in one daring gesture, and about the risks inherent in stepping outside a comfort zone. For automotive enthusiasts, that's a lesson worth carrying forward, because so many of the cars we cherish today started life as bold moves that didn't quite land at the time. What makes the 262C's journey so compelling is how it mirrors the life cycle of ideas themselves. They can be misunderstood, dismissed, even mocked, but given time and the right context, they can emerge with a clarity that was invisible at first. In the case of the 262C, what once looked like a miscalculation now looks like foresight, a willingness to stretch boundaries that paved the way for future designs and opened doors to global collaboration long before it was common practice. For modern collectors and fans, the payoff is twofold. On one hand, the coupe offers rarity and uniqueness without the astronomical cost of other European exotics. On the other, it offers a story, and stories are the real currency of automotive culture. When you drive or display a 262C, you're not just showing metal and leather. You're showing a narrative of risk, resilience, and rediscovery. That narrative, more than horsepower or luxury badges, is what makes a car memorable. And so, As we leave the tale of the Volvo 262C, we are reminded that sometimes the most interesting machines are not the ones that succeeded easily, but the ones that struggled, adapted, and survived long enough to be appreciated anew. Thank you for joining us on Overdrive Insider, where we celebrate these unlikely journeys and the culture that surrounds them. Until next time, automotive enthusiasts, keep seeking out the stories hidden in the corners of car history, and may every drive connect you more deeply to the machines that move us.